We'll open the floor to questions. I know Godwin mentioned that some of the Joint Border Committee chairs are in the room, so if you would like to speak about your experience in working in creating the Joint Border Committees. Also, the private sector perspective on this would be welcome. And then I know he mentioned that Compete is working on one of the borders collectively, and I know David from the Compete Project is here, and I don't know if he would want to comment. So we'll open the floor for comments and questions. Yes, in the back.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the presenters. I just have a question in terms of monitoring and evaluation. I know it's probably still early days, but as SADC, and I don't know if you can speak for COMESA and Trade Hub, do you have a mechanism in place where you have started to say, as a result of these reforms that we're doing at the border, at the borders, the levels of trade are increasing by X%? Is this something you are monitoring and looking at? And how much can you attribute to the transformation at the borders? Thank you.
I think that question's directed to both of you, and certainly M&E is a very important topic in the development world now. So I'll turn the floor over to whoever wants to take it first. Godwin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, that's a very important point you have raised from the AEDB. As the Trade Hub, we have made it a point that before we start working at a border, we actually make a baseline. In other words, we go to a border, during the border operation assessment, we measure how long it's taking for trucks to go through the border. And we have now what we call the baseline. In other words, for each of those borders we've been to, we've come out with a baseline. And what we have also done is try and work out with the Joint Border Committees to establish a mechanism of regularly measuring how those times are actually being reduced as a result of the action plans being implemented to address those challenges which have been alluded to earlier on. I must admit at this point in time, it has not been very easy to come out with the mechanisms which are reliable to actually measure on a regular basis. And we're still making efforts in that respect. However, we have actually recently done surveys, again, gone back to the same borders, where we did take baselines about a year ago to assess what has been the impact of the implementation of the action plans, which have been in place for almost a year. It is pleasing to note that in one of the borders, for example, the Manza, and we do have the Manza chairperson of the JBC here, that in fact the time for exports going through that border were reduced to the tune of almost 52% because of the actions they were taking to reduce the delays at the border. However, we also found when we did that survey that the time for imports coming in did not improve much, and the main reason for that was that Malawi, which is the border, that border is actually in Malawi, they had changed the method of clearing goods where they had recently centralized the clearance of all imports in such a way that all the clearance were no longer being done at the border. And they are still in the learning curve in terms of the new methodology and also the communication problem between the border and the center. Maybe we've got the Commissioner of Customs from Malawi here. Maybe she might want to comment on that. but that was a major contribution to the delay on that. In essence, then, we have got mechanism of measuring. We're trying to develop the mechanism of regular measuring, but until those are effective, we're actually having to continue doing surveys to continue monitoring how the measures we have put in place are actually improving, reducing the time and cost of crossing the border. Thank you.
Just to add on what Godwin has said, I alluded that there are two approaches. There is the joint border committee, and there is also another approach whereby people start from the policy level. Now, coming on to the joint border committees, I think implementation started in August, September last year. Tunganza, Songwe, then Tunduma, Nakonde, and the studies here is indicated to actually as a result of what has taken place over the past 12 months in Zambia and Malawi. But like I said, we are also, the Joint Border Committee, you focus at a border post, you go there, structures are set, and within a month, things are running and going. But when it comes to the other approach, whereby we have also engaged some member states in the region, it involves coming up with national structures at national level, setting up committees, and that takes a bit of time, and we are yet to implement a CBM along those lines. Although there is work in the process, there is work in order to get some countries implement that type of concept. But the two can actually run together as well. The two can run together. Thank you.
Okay, boy, this
Yes,
side of the
please.
room has an incredible amount of hands up. Let's start here in front.
Thank you. I would just like to shortly comment on the measuring of time needed to cross the borders. You may remember that yesterday during my presentation, I mentioned the time release study guide that was developed by the WCO. And we have actually in the previous years given technical assistance to members to help measure this time and identify bottlenecks. And actually, what is usually being done is introducing a system for regular measuring of time needed for cross-border movements in order to see how it is improving or if it's not improving at all. But what I would also like to mention, which I didn't say yesterday, is that we have actually adopted a revised version of the TRS, as we call it, and now it incorporates not only elements regarding imports, but it now also actually takes into consideration the new environment and the needs of actually regionalization. So it has, should I say, elements regarding regional measuring of time needed to cross borders from one country to another and passing through other countries as well. So I think that might be also very useful for countries to refer to as a very useful, I say, guide and instrument. Thank you.
This side, please.
Thank you. Are there questions?
Yeah, I have a. Could you kindly look?
I'm sorry, put all your hands up again so that I can just note where people, okay, let's start right here in the light colored jacket. Yes, you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mine is more of a comment. My name is Joseph Msariri from the Federation of Clearing and Forwarding Associations of Southern Africa. But I may also require a response from both SADC and USAID. The concept of coordinated border management, I think it's a very welcome development from a clearing agent point of view, because it tries to do away with the running around that we are currently doing when we are clearing goods. But I think if we look at what we discussed yesterday about the single window concept, I think the two should be treated like Siamese twins. I think we can get maximum benefit of coordinated border management if we ride on the single window concept. Then the next thing that I wanted to point out was that the trade facilitation and border efficiencies involve two sides of a coin. One side is the government side, which we are trying to address since yesterday. The other side is the private sector side, which I think has been largely neglected. Delays are caused by government agencies, and they are equally caused by clearing agents and freight forwarders. And there are some challenges that are there in the private sector that the region has not paid adequate attention to. The most common one being capacity building issue. You find even in terms of training, if you go throughout the region, the majority of member states of SADC, from the private sector point of view, they have no training facilities. And here you are looking at situations where government officials, there's an endeavor to train them, and they are dealing on a daily basis with clearing agents and freight forwarders that have never been trained. And no effort is being put to try and capacitate the sector so that we can achieve a holistic approach in trying to tackle this. Because once we keep on looking at one side of the coin, yes, we will get results, but on that side of the coin, but we still need to polish up the other side of the coin so that we achieve better trade facilitation. Thank you.
I'll give the floor to Godwin to comment on the capacity building for the private sector.
Yeah, thanks very much for that question. Yeah, that's why I try to make the point that when you're talking about coordinated border management, you need both the private sector and the public sector. You need both to work together very closely. You need that partnership. And indeed, you're right. I mean, there are areas where you need the private sector to improve. And in Malawi, we identified that. I mean, the joint border committees identified that, and identified that, in fact, you needed training of the clearing forwarding agents. And we are in the process of defining that training requirements with Malawi Revenue Authority, and we'll work together with Malawi Revenue Authority to provide the training to the clearing and forwarding agents so that they are competent enough to partner with the public sector in order to efficiently clear goods at the border. Thank you.
Just to add on what Godwin has said, and also firstly to agree with you on the single window concept, that the two go together. I totally agree with you. Then secondly, you mentioned about training for private sector. I think earlier on, I did allude to the fact that at a border, you'll find that probably customs are the ones who are better trained than most other agencies there. From my previous experience, customs normally would be the ones who are exposed to a lot of training, coordination, collaboration, I think partly due to the existence of the World Customs Organization, whereby customs authorities, there's a lot of collaboration, unlike with other agencies. But still, to add further, the SADC Secretariat has been encouraging the formation of customs to business forums in member states, whereby you try to have customs and their stakeholders engage one another, communicate, and that is actually a forum where, after identifying your training needs, the SADC Secretariat can also assist and facilitate. I just mentioned that a week ago, last week, a Customs to Business Forum was launched in Malawi, and during the same week, we also ran training programs in rules of origin for both customs administrations and the other stakeholders. So we are ready to move in upon your invitation and upon coming up with clearly identified training needs. And we believe that Customs to Business Forum is actually a route which can assist us in identifying those needs. The guidelines, the SADC guidelines, which I said are on the website, they also mention about the involvement of the private sector in coming up with the coordinated border management. In fact, one element which comes out very clear is coordinated border management is not a monopoly of customs administrations. It's across various agencies. Even when the subcommittee on customs cooperation met and looked at the guidelines, they also realized the need to consult wider and engage other stakeholders on the contents of those. And these consultations were conducted because it's all encompassing and it involves other agencies, not just customs. Thank you.
Well, I'm sorry, but our Master of Ceremonies has given me the signal that we have to wrap up, and I know that people still have a lot of things to say. It was, our last person from the floor did talk about the fact of how single window was as important as coordinated border management. And as I said, I think, well, the analogy of the three-legged stool is so overused, but as I said in my opening remarks, it really has three legs here. The single window we talked about yesterday, the coordinated border management that we just talked about now, and then the one-stop border post, which we're going to get to, which is why I'm going to wrap up. But I hope that those of you who had comments about the coordinated border management will also be able to make them in the one-stop border post discussion. So we will wrap up now. Mr. MC, I assume we're going to coffee, is that correct? And I'll let you give the time frame on that. Thank you. And thank you to our speakers. I apologize. Thank you very much to our speakers.
Thank you, Virginia. Shall we take a 15-minute break for tea and coffee and reconvene here? And again, as Virginia said, those who couldn't ask questions, I saw the two gentlemen who were frantically waving their hands. We can pick them up in the next session. Okay.